Bibliophiles of the Internet. My name is Adriana, and today I'm here to finally bring you my March wrap-up. So without further ado, let's get into the books. The first book I completed in March was Station 11 by Emily St. John Mandel. Station 11 is a post-apocalyptic narrative about a world that has been ravaged by a disease known as Georgian flu, which has wiped out pretty much almost all of humanity. And for the most part, this story follows a small group of survivors 15 years after the Georgian flu's initial discovery. I'm sure many of you have heard rave reviews about Station 11, and what I have to say is not going to be much different because I thought this was an amazing novel. It's a really fascinating narrative with all of its complexity and its nuances. There are so many characters and so many different storylines, and it's really interesting to see how they interact with one another and how they overlap with one another as well. So I thought it was really great to see how all these different characters affected one another, whether they met each other or not. And I also thought it was a great commentary on what endures in humanity, whether that's a physical item or inventions that we cling to, or whether it's a way of life, or whether it's something that is created like art or literature. So I really loved this book, and I ended up giving Station 11 a 4.5 out of 5 stars. The next two things I read were both graphic novels, and they were lent to me by my good friend Steven. So thank you, Steven, for fueling my addiction to graphic novels. The first one he lent me was Lost at Sea by Brian Lee O'Malley. Lost at Sea is Brian Lee O'Malley's first graphic novel, and it's about a character who finds herself on a road trip in California with some of her classmates who she doesn't even know or really like. I feel like you all know by now that I unconditionally love Brian Lee O'Malley's work, and I consider his work to be a staple of the comic genre. But I was not feeling this graphic novel at all. And even though I acknowledge that Lost at Sea was his first big graphic novel, the first thing that put him on the map, so it's bound to be rough in one way or another, I just think it was kind of trying too hard. And I think the most notable thing about this story is that there's a really big imbalance between the main character's internal dialogue and what's happening outside of her mind. So I had several issues with this graphic novel, from the way it came off to the writing style and also to the characters themselves. But to sum it all up, I think I'll just say that I gave Lost at Sea 2.5 out of 5 stars. But the next graphic novel that Steven lent me, I enjoyed exponentially more, and that was This One Summer by Mariko and Jillian Tamaki. So this comic is about two girls who are best friends, and their families both own beach houses kind of in the same area, and they both vacation there at the same time every summer. And this one particular summer is a very interesting time in both of their lives because they're entering teenagedom, so there's a lot of different emotions going on, a lot of different self-discovery going on, and with that comes the fact that they're kind of breaking away from things they used to do in childhood or things that they used to enjoy together in childhood. I love the art style and the attention to detail in This One Summer. I love the color palette. I love the paneling. But what I love most of all is that the creators know when to use silence. And in comics, that is such a rare and beautiful thing, and I think that creates this wonderful emotional atmosphere. I thought it was a really great coming of age novel. It was messy, it was confusing, it was emotional, and I also love the way the art style just complemented all of that. So I ended up giving This One Summer a very strong 4 stars. After that, I read I'll Give You the Sun by Jandy Nelson. I'm not going to talk about this book at all in my wrap-up because I already did a full and spoiler-free review for this book in which I summarize the story, and I also talk about my thoughts and my thoughts on the writing style. So I will link that down below so that you can check that out if you haven't seen it yet. But for posterity's sake, I will say that I gave I'll Give You the Sun 4.5 out of 5 stars. After that, I checked out 2 comics from my library, and that was the first 2 volumes of Hawkeye by Matt Fraction and also a huge team of fellow creators. I don't think this comic series really requires much in terms of summarization other than these are the adventures of Hawkeye outside of the Avengers. So every chapter in this comic series is full of action, but there's also humor, and Hawkeye is so snarky and full of one-liners, and I just really enjoyed it. And it's also really great to see his interaction with Kate Bishop as well, and how they function together, both being Hawkeye and how they fight crime together and stuff. And as always, there is that fascinating dynamic with Hawkeye, wherein on one hand, yes, he is a superhero, and yes, he is a member of the Avengers, but on the other hand, he's just a regular guy, and at the end of the day, he's just human. So I gave the first volume 4 stars, and I gave the second volume 3.5 stars. After that, I read a book that I am not on speaking terms with at the moment, and that is I Am the Messenger by Marcus Zuzak. This book is about a main character named Ed Kennedy who puts a stop to a local bank robbery. As a result of that, he accrues some mild fame within his town, and then somebody decides that they're gonna mess with his life. So someone starts dropping these cards in his mailbox, and on those cards are names or hints as to places he needs to go or people whose lives he needs to improve in some way. I think for so many reasons, the premise in this book and the main character in this book are so problematic. I just don't think the story itself is very convincing because it's hard to believe that a complete and total stranger could just walk into someone else's life for the briefest of moments and change that person's life forever. I'm just not a fan of this character who is in many ways coming from a place of privilege, and then he's supposed to be this great guy because he's exposing himself to these marginalized people, to these people who are suffering from real problems, and then he's masquerading with those problems and acting like they're his own and acting as if they're just a tool or a device for him to learn something greater about himself in some way. And I had so many other issues with this story and with this character, and so I will leave my Goodreads review in the description down below because I really get into it. But needless to say, I really didn't enjoy this book, and I gave it a 2 out of 5 stars. But on a much better note, the last thing I read in March was A Darker Shade of Magic by V.E. Schwab. And this book is about a main character named Kel who lives in a world where there are parallel Londons lined up next to one another, and he is one of only 2 people who can traverse between them. I had such a great time reading the first book in this series. I thought it was so much fun, so quick, so engaging. The characters are vibrant and exciting and dynamic, and it's really interesting to see how they interact with one another because I think the dialogue is another strong point in this story. There's a lot of really great interaction between characters and some fantastic banter as well. And I also found this world to be so intriguing. My interest is definitely piqued, and I think that this first book did a great job of establishing this fantastical world and kind of explaining in basic terms how it works. And I think that's another thing that we should credit to V.E. Schwab is that not only has she created this fascinating, fantastical world, but she has made it so inviting and so accessible. And that's what I think is one of the best parts of this book is that you don't have to be an expert on fantasy by any means to enjoy it. I think anybody can read it and find it fascinating and engaging. So I really enjoyed this first book, and I ended up giving it a 4 out of 5 stars. So those were all of the books I read in March. In the comments down below, please feel free to let me know if you have also read any of the books I discussed today, or let me know what was your favorite thing that you read in March, or what do you plan on reading now that we're in April. But that is everything I have for this wrap up today, so thank you so much for watching this video. I really hope that you enjoyed it, and I will catch you on the flip side of the page. Bye!